What up guys, my name is Stan from RandomTens, and it's officially Pokemon. And without further delay, let's look at our first countdown of the month, the top 10 best mythical and event Pokemon of all time. Before I start though, I want to make the criteria as clear as I can. In order to avoid as much bias as possible, each Pokemon was ranked in 3 main areas. These include design and creativity, impact on the series as a whole, and finally strength and ability, which can encompass anything from being powerful in the metagame to having a unique typing combination or fighting ability. It's by no means perfect, but I wanted to make this list as fair as possible for every event Pokemon, and this criteria seemed to make the most sense, at least to me. And with that out of the way, let's do this. Hopefully your favorite makes the cut. Number 10. There's going to be a lot of folks upset at this Gen 3 Pokemon's placement on this countdown, but the truth is that despite being admittedly adorable, Jirachi doesn't have a whole lot that separates it from the other mythical beings. Now, I'd be a fool if I didn't give this Wish Pokemon full points for creative design, as the Wish Upon a Star motif absolutely shines through, and definitely makes this creature stand out to me and many other fans of the series. It's also worth pointing out that Jirachi has a unique typing combination that in terms of both event and legendary Pokemon is unique to only it, which, along with its signature move Doom Desire, adds up to one impressionable pocket monster. But I do think that it also has a few things working against it. For starters, its overall impact on the series and popularity in general is pretty low, especially considering the most recent Pokemon games were remakes of Gen 3. Don't get me wrong, Jirachi has many fans around the world, but with zero real impact on the games, seriously, it's one of the only event Pokemon without an actual in-game event, and a pretty mediocre movie as its one real showcase, this Psychic Steel type just doesn't cut it among some of its more accomplished peers. I imagine that this placing especially will prove controversial, and I may even get a few nasty comments, but even though I personally love Jirachi quite a bit, objectively, it just barely makes the cut. Number 9. I'll be honest, depending on the next few months, this mysterious Pokemon could eventually go much higher or much lower depending on how it's perceived by audiences. And with a new movie on the horizon, it's about time we finally talk about Volcanion. Now, I've gotta say, for the record, I hated this Pokemon when it first leaked years ago. I honestly thought it was bad fan art, drawn by someone who loves Naruto just a little too much, but lo and behold, Volcanion is officially the 721st Pokemon. And after a few years, myself, and I think many others as well, have warmed up to this Steam Pokemon. Right off the bat, it gets huge points in the strength and ability department by simply being the first fire-water hybrid Pokemon ever. This is one of those typing combinations that diehard fans have been wanting for years, and personally, although I think it could have been done a lot better, Volcanion at least does stand out, and has a design that's as unique as its typing. Also, I think its ability Water Absorb makes perfect sense, as it basically uses water as fuel to power its attacks and movements. On the other hand though, Volcanion's typing is fairly exploitable, making it look more intimidating than it actually is. At this particular moment in time, Volcanion has become a poster boy of sorts for the Pokemon franchise, and so it's hard to accurately place it on a list like this. However, there's no doubt in my mind that if it can deliver a solid film and really make an impact this summer, it could go on to become one of the most popular mythical Pokemon ever made. Number 8. For whatever reason, I've always found Gen 5 to be the most polarizing generation throughout Pokemon's 20-year history. Some fans absolutely love it, while just as many despise it to the same degree. However, when it comes to the first Pokemon in the Unova Dex, everyone seems to be on the exact same page. Victini has one of those timeless designs where it's simple enough that it practically looks like a throwback to Gen 1, and yet still has enough detail that it could belong in Sun and Moon's lineup. Beyond its design, Victini also has a sizable impact on the series overall, being one of the first Gen 5 Pokemon ever revealed, as well as appearing as the main star in parallel films during the Black and White series. Unfortunately, however, in terms of strength and ability, Victini sort of has a rough time, as there's nothing beyond its signature move and Victory Star ability that help it really stand out. Also, being a Psychic Fire type comes with a large amount of weaknesses, and can leave this creature helpless against many diversified teams. It's not bad in battle, but it's by no means great, and when coupled with its lack of uniqueness, even its stellar design can't save it from only capturing the number 8 spot. Number 7. I'm not sure why, but for some reason Game Freak became increasingly fond of alternate forms for Pokemon in later generations. This applies to everyday run-of-the-mill Pokemon, mascot legendaries, and yes, even mythical Pokemon, like the next creature on our list. So it's a little shocking that despite being relatively new to the series, Hoopa, along with its Unbound form, brought a need of fresh air to the whole mythical Pokemon concept, with not one, but two very interesting designs. Personally, I thought it was brilliant to give players both a cutesy and powerful mythical Pokemon all in one package, and overall, I truly believe Hoopa is one of Game Freak's best designs in years. Being based on a genie, Hoopa brought something new to the table in terms of origin and theme, and with Hoopa confined, players also got their first taste of a psychic ghost-type Pokemon. In fact, both of Hoopa's forms have pretty insane typing, and once mastered, Hoopa is a decent addition to any team. The only place it's really lacking seems to be impact, and truth be told, this Pokemon didn't set the world on fire with its big screen debut, and since then it's only faded more and more in terms of popularity as Pokemon continues to expand its roster. Still though, Hoopa was a refreshing addition to the mythical Pokemon family, and in my personal opinion, you should check it out for yourself if you haven't already. Number 6. Sometimes when I make objective lists like this one, my opinions and choices can slip through the cracks and inform decisions. I can't deny this fact, and at the end of the day, I'm human, and sometimes my prejudices and subconscious sway me in a direction that might not make logical sense. But I promise, I really do try to make these countdowns as fair as I possibly can, and it's for this reason that putting Celebi in the number 6 spot hurts so much. For those who don't know, I would easily put this bug-eyed Forest Guardian in my top 15 Pokemon of all time, just outside of the top 10. I love time travel and all of the stories it creates, and for me, Celebi is an adorable embodiment of all of that. However, even though it's appeared in 2 films and has one of the cooler in-game events, as well as an entire communal website named after it, going by the rules I've said, Celebi doesn't crack the top 5. Sadly, to many in the Pokemon community, it will always be overshadowed by the original mythical Pokemon, and for some reason this psychic grass type just never caught on the same way. In fact, there's even a recent Japanese popularity poll where Celebi placed below other event mainstays like Shaymin, Manaphy, and even Keldeo. Now, I know that polls don't mean everything, but besides popularity, Celebi's also not the greatest fighter in the Pokemon universe, and it's not nearly as strategic as other creatures like the aforementioned Shaymin and Keldeo. So although I personally love it, and I know many others do too, I can't justify putting it any higher than 6th on a countdown like this, even if it has a memorable design and one of the bigger impacts on the series overall. Number 5. Quick question, what's the most neglected typing in all of Pokemon? Now, to be fair, you could make an argument that both Poison and of course Ghost types are grossly underrepresented across the series, but for whatever reason, I always thought that Bug types got the rawest end of the deal. However, that was alleviated a bit when Black and White were finally released, and with that generation, we also got our first Bug-type mythical Pokemon in Genesect. Of course, I can't bring up this science experiment without making the Mewtwo comparison, and in many ways that's fair. They're both powerful man-made Pokemon created by the evil gang of their respective generations, and they both shared the screen in the 16th Pokemon film. However, I think Genesect does have enough that differentiates it from its Gen 1 co-star. For starters, its very creation and design leaves players with far more questions than Mewtwo ever did, with logical theories that Genesect may even be a revived Kabutops with cybernetic enhancements. It's the sort of Pokemon that has some weight and mystery to its backstory, kind of like Mew, and I think fans of the series really enjoy that kind of thing. On top of that, as mentioned before, this is the first mythical bug-type Pokemon, and it's as good in battle as it is unique. Having the same typing as Scizor gives this purple insect an incredible lineup of resistances, and only one 4x weakness to fire. However, it can also use its signature move, Technoblast, to become an adaptable weapon in 4 different typings, including both fire and water. And finally, and possibly most surprisingly, remember that popularity poll I mentioned earlier? Well, apparently in Japan at least, Genesect is incredibly well liked because it placed 6th out of every single Pokemon. That's higher than Rayquaza, that's higher than Mewtwo, and that's even higher than Charizard. Genesect is by no means perfect, and at the end of the day, there are still both more creative and powerful mythical Pokemon out there. But with a compelling history, a versatile move pool, and its surprising popularity, it'd be a crime if it somehow didn't make the top 5. Number 4. I'm not too sure about how Game Freak and the Pokemon Company feel about this next entry, but if there's one thing I do know, it's that its fans adore it. Maybe it's because it's just designed so well, or maybe it's because it was the star of one of the best Pokemon films ever made, but either way, Darkrai is one of the most glorified mythical Pokemon to come out of the entire series. It has a simplicity in its design that gives off both a sense of foreboding and loneliness, and I believe that's where a lot of its support comes from. Darkrai is sort of like that really big guy in high school who everyone's terrified of, but actually has a heart of gold. It gets a bad rap just for looking a certain way, and I think a lot of folks can relate to that sort of thing. Beyond aesthetics though, it's fairly generic for a mythical Pokemon, as it has the standard 600 base stat total, but no alternate forms or game-changing abilities to help increase its prowess on the battlefield. It does get a few points, however, for being the only Dark-type legendary or mythical Pokemon we had, at least until Gen 6, and of course, this is one of those rare Pokemon that really does leave a huge impression on people. It's flawed, that's for sure, but in a way, I think that's sort of the point of a creature like Darkrai, and regardless if Game Freak chooses to promote it to the world or not, it's clear that the world can't get enough of this pitch-black Pokemon. Number 3. I won't try to sugarcoat this one. Deoxys is a very controversial choice for number 3 on a list like this. There's no doubt in my mind that both Darkrai and even Celebi have made a greater impact on fans over the years, but let me at least try and explain my reasoning for putting it so high. Whereas most of the mythical Pokemon on this list have made their greatest impressions on audiences via the films and the anime series, Deoxys has been an innovator of the games. Think about it for a second. Before Game Freak went crazy giving every special Pokemon some origin form or primal evolution, Deoxys was the first legendary or mythical Pokemon that could switch its forms, therefore making it more specialized to battle however the player wanted. Sure, technically cast form came first, but before it became just another routine part of legendary and event Pokemon, Deoxys' form changes were a pretty creative way to give it some personality. Now, I'll admit that in terms of popularity, it's got nothing on many of its mythical peers, but by being one of the most unique Pokemon ever created, and being a pioneer in terms of battle strategy, I think this Pokemon is vastly underrated in terms of what it's done for the series. And might I add that to this day, Deoxys is the only event or mythical Pokemon that actually has a real in-game story and weight behind it, being a catchable Pokemon in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Is it ever going to be voted prom queen? Absolutely not. But does it deserve its spot as the number 3 best mythical Pokemon? It's certainly up for debate, but I think so. Number 2. Well, considering the criteria and all, I suppose figuring out the top 2 probably was a no-brainer. Some people will claim that this is just another boring countdown, but if I'm being objectively fair, there's no way that these next 2 Pokemon wouldn't come out on top. So the only question remaining is one of placement, and with all of the criteria laid out, I think it makes sense that Mew would take the number 2 spot. Now, this is a tricky one because not only is Mew one of my favorite Pokemon period, it's also the OG Mythical. So how could I give Deoxys so much credit for being innovative and then only rank Mew second when it's almost guaranteed that many of the creatures on this list wouldn't even exist without it? Well, despite being deeply ingrained in Pokemon's lore and critical to the overall success of the series, Mew just isn't as powerful or as strategic as the number 1 on this countdown. It's got a fantastic and, let's face it, iconic design that puts every succeeding cute legendary to shame. It's malleable as heck with the ability to learn almost every single move in the games, and its impact on the series is up there with the likes of Pikachu itself, and yet would you believe that in the popularity poll I've mentioned throughout this video, Mew only finished 3rd in voting. So which 2 Pokemon beat it out to take the gold and silver medals respectively? Well, in first was Greninja, but what shocked me the most was which mythical Pokemon outplaced the original number 151. So as it turns out, Mew is an incredible Pokemon and basically as perfect as you can get when it comes to mythical designs. And yet, what's perfection in the face of a god? Number 1. Full disclaimer, this number 1 Pokemon has a lot of ways to pronounce its name, and I'm just gonna go with the one I feel most comfortable with. Capiche? So yeah, as surprising as it sounds, the Sinnoh creator of all Pokemon, Arceus, actually placed ahead of Mew in not only that popularity poll, but also this countdown. So how could that be? Well, essentially Game Freak set the impossible task of creating an embodiment of God in the Pokemon universe. A creature that both looked and affected players as only a deity could, and from everything I've seen, they succeeded. When wielding one of its 17 plates, Arceus is capable of becoming any type of Pokemon that the player wants, which unsurprisingly gives this Pokemon unparalleled depth while playing competitive. You add in the fact that it also possesses a ridiculous 720 base stat total and a very deep move pool, and there's no denying that in terms of strength and ability, Arceus comes out on top. Its design also has a certain regality to it that makes it stand out as something special immediately, and I would argue that Arceus is to the powerful looking event Pokemon what Mew is to the cute ones. And although personally I think my mom would be way more likely to recognize Mew than Arceus, I can't deny the global impact and appeal it's had on the series, and even though Mew will always be the creature I imagine when I think of mythical Pokemon, there's tons of evidence that proves that Arceus is, at least for now, the most popular of all its legendary and event brethren worldwide. And so, despite all of the entries on this countdown being incredible additions to the Pokemon series, in terms of the criteria, Arceus is hands down the strongest, most adaptable, and best mythical and event Pokemon ever made. Well, I hope I didn't offend too many people with that countdown, and I really hope that you guys are especially excited for this year's edition of Pokemon. Please let me know your favorite mythical or event Pokemon in the comment section below. Follow us on Twitter at RandomTens if you feel so inclined, and as I always say, happy hunting, baby rhinos. Hey guys, Stan here. I just want to quickly apologize for the lack of content, the lack of uploading on Saturday mornings, like our, under our name on our channel banner says we will do. Basically, what's been going on is some really great stuff has happened, and some really not so great stuff has kind of happened to me in my personal life over the past month or so, I would say. And it's nothing crazy bad. I am perfectly fine. I'm perfectly okay, healthy, happy. Things are good. It's just been really tricky to edit and deal with all of that stuff that's happening as well. So I've had to cut some corners, and unfortunately I've had to delay some things. So if Pokemonth does end up going into a little bit into August, then it's not the end of the world. But I just thought I owed you guys kind of an explanation as to what's going on behind the scenes. But starting officially, like right now, I have already begun work on the next episode for Pokemonth. And hopefully you guys will get to see that next week. So stay tuned for that, and thank you so much for watching this video, and take care.